Hello and welcome. Our guest today is Alexander Grace from Red Pill Interviews. Alexander, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So today we're talking about the economics of relationships, and Alexander, you wanted to present the Red Pill perspective on all of this.
Yeah, that's right. They have a saying that men are the gatekeepers of relationships and women are the gatekeepers of sex.
I don't understand. What do they mean by gatekeepers?
Think of it this way. Women have something that men want, sex, and they keep it locked behind a gate. So because they're the gatekeepers, they can set the price. Essentially, they'd say to a man, if you want me to unlock this gate so that you can have sex with me, then this is my price. You have to do this. Typically, it involves some kind of commitment or relationship. But what's important to understand is that when it comes to sex, women are in control. They're in charge, so they set the conditions and they say what are the criteria that must first be met.
So for a man, behind his gate is commitment, like relationships and marriage, and so before he unlocks his gate, he sets his price. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, and typically one of the most important things that a man will want in exchange for his commitment is a thriving sex life.
I've got to say, I'm not totally comfortable talking about this in such a cold, emotionless way. You speak of relationships between men and women as if they're business transactions.
Well, there's nothing dirty about business transactions. It's two people voluntarily consenting to provide each other with something that the other wants for their mutual benefit. It's win-win for all parties involved.
But I don't think that people approach their love lives like that. Relationships are emotional and spiritual. People don't plan it out like a business deal.
Of course, relationships can be emotional and spiritual, but that doesn't mean that what's being transacted can't be rationally analysed. Even two old friends who just like talking and enjoying each other's company are still having a transaction of positive emotions going on between them. The fact that they're both benefiting doesn't diminish from the specialness of the interaction.
But you have to admit that it's a bit naive to just say that men want sex and women want relationships and pretend that that's all there is to it.
Oh, of course, and I don't want to oversimplify this. Women love sex, and lots of men absolutely love commitment. So there are actually thousands of factors that are going on in human interactions. I don't want to try and pretend that their motivations are just black and white.
So you agree that there's more going on here than just the trade of sex and commitment?
Definitely. However, in order to have a meaningful discussion about this, we're going to temporarily need to put aside a lot of those other factors and just speak in terms of generalizations. And, in a general sense, women enter into relationships primarily looking for commitment, security, safety, while one of the top motivations for men entering into relationships is access to sex.
Okay, so we're talking in generalizations. But in a practical sense, in like a real life situation, what does this look like?
Okay, so imagine a woman who every man wants to sleep with. She's confident that she has something locked behind her gate that's extremely valuable, so she can set whatever price she wants. She can demand that men marry her, take her on expensive holidays, pamper her, treat her like a princess, whatever she likes really. And because she's of such high value, she's going to find someone who's going to meet those criteria.
And are you saying that this is a bad thing, that she shouldn't put her price that high?
No, not at all. She has every right to set her price at whatever she likes. She may have it too high, she may have it too low, but the market will give her feedback and she can adjust her pricing accordingly.
So you don't have a problem with women setting these kind of criteria?
Oh, of course not. That's great. Go, do your thing. That's female empowerment. But, of course, the flip side is that men can also set their price when it comes to commitment. Empowerment goes both ways, and I'm very much in favour of male empowerment too.
So before a man opens up his gate and enters into a relationship with a woman, he can set his price as well?
That's right. So let's say that he's a very attractive prospect for a woman. He's wealthy, he's got high status, maybe even he's famous. He can set a very high price. He can demand a very abundant sex life or the ability to sleep with multiple women, whatever price he likes really.
And he can expect to achieve that price because his commitment is such a valuable commodity?
Basically, yes. That's why you see these rich and powerful men frequently having affairs and their wives tolerate it. That's sort of the price for being in a relationship with them. It's also why you see women who are trying to enter into relationships with these men be very sexually available.
What do you mean? Are you saying that if a man is high caliber enough, a woman will do things with him sexually that she wouldn't do with a lower tier male?
Oh, definitely. Women have told me so. In one of my earlier videos, the one called Sex Life Consistency, the women I interviewed told me how they'd be more sexually available to a man that they wanted to keep in a relationship. If anyone hasn't seen that video, I'll put a link in the description box below.
This all makes me quite uncomfortable. You're basically calling women whores, saying that they'll trade sex just for a lavish lifestyle with a high-status man.
Look, of course we're talking in generalizations, but I'm not singling out women here. Men are doing the exact same thing. And you could say that everyone's whoring themselves out, but that's an unnecessarily bleak way of putting it. The fact is that people are making rational decisions to better their lives by making relational transactions with each other for their mutual benefit.
I just think that you have a very dark way of looking at things. I don't believe that people are that calculating. Relationships are about love, not about trading things with each other.
I'm not discounting all that other stuff. Relationships definitely have love and support and 1,000 other things that go far beyond just a transaction for sex and commitment. But it seems self-evident to me that this phenomena is playing itself out in society. For sure, it's stronger in some individuals than others, but to bury your head in the sand and pretend that this doesn't exist seems like just denying facts and reality.
Okay, so why is this important for men to know?
It's important for men to understand their own value and to price themselves accordingly. It's a real tragedy when a man undervalues himself and enters into a bad transaction. That's a decision that can negatively affect him for the rest of his life.
Can you give me an example of what that would look like?
The most extreme example I can think of would be a man who works full-time at a job that he hates, supporting a wife who doesn't work, doesn't respect him, doesn't have sex with him, and won't let him sleep with other women or even watch pornography.
Well, from a transactional point of view, that doesn't sound like a fair trade. Because if he's working and supporting them, then she should at least be appreciative of that.
Yes, absolutely. This is not a fair trade.
But it's not purely her fault, right? I mean, it takes two people to make a trade.
That's true. While she's certainly not treating her husband well by denying him the ability to meet his sexual needs, it's not purely her fault.
So the husband is also responsible.
Definitely. After all, he was the one who set the price. In hindsight, he set it far too low. He was more valuable than he realized. Now he's made a bad trade and has buyer's regret.
So what should he have done?
He should have stopped and appreciated just how much he was worth before he met this woman, or even before he started dating. It's important to have a very clear sense of your value so that you don't accidentally sell yourself too cheap.
In that case, he could have asked for something better than a sexless marriage in exchange for his commitment.
Exactly. In his initial interactions with the woman, he should have clearly communicated that what he has to offer is extremely valuable, and that if they want to make a transaction, she's going to need to provide something very valuable as well. At the very least, a fulfilling sex life.
But what's to stop a woman from making promises, and then after they're locked into a committed long-term relationship, from reneging on those promises?
Nothing. And that sort of thing happens all the time. Though it doesn't just happen to men, it can happen to women too. After a marriage, if a man decides that he's actually not ambitious anymore, so he gives up his high-paying job and just smokes weed all day, surfing, fishing, living in a shack.
That doesn't seem as likely, though, because men are just naturally ambitious.
That's true. Though some men do lose their ambition, it's far more likely that a woman's going to lose her interest in sex. You only need to look at sitcoms to see how common it is for a couple's sex life to decrease after marriage. The culture's very aware of this.
So there's no way to prevent that from occurring?
Well, in a way, that's what the MGTOW men are trying to protect against. That's why they're anti-marriage. Prevention is the best medicine, and if you're concerned about someone not upholding their end of the bargain, then you're safest just not entering into a long-term contract.
So that's why MGTOW men don't enter into marriage, because the price is too high.
Exactly. A MGTOW man places his worth very high and says that there's nothing a woman could really offer that could legitimately be bargained for marriage. This is why MGTOW men don't get married. Some don't enter into relationships and some don't even date at all.
And that's because of a belief in their own high self-worth.
Sometimes, though, even a man of low self-worth can give up on dating and call himself a MGTOW. For that type of man, it's not so much that he thinks of his own value as extremely high, he just thinks that women as a whole have way overpriced themselves, particularly those in the Western culture. And with the price being so inflated, essentially any transaction he makes is going to be to his detriment.
What does it mean to say that women have overpriced themselves? How does something like that happen?
It means that women think that what they have to offer is more valuable than it actually is. And how this came to be is actually quite fascinating. See, back in the day, women really needed a man. They depended on him for financial support. And there was a lot of shame about being a single woman. So culturally and practically, a woman needed to find a man.
But now there's a lot less social stigma for being a single woman.
That's right. Plus, women are now able to support themselves through a job or through government welfare. And as a consequence, men and what they can provide is a far less valuable commodity than what it used to be.
Are you saying that things were better off then when women were dependent on men?
Not at all. I'm just saying that it was a major shift in the sexual marketplace.
So then, the decrease in the value of what men had to offer led to an increase in the value of women.
Sort of, but it gets more complicated than that, because you need to factor in the ways in which a woman's sense of her own worth is being inflated. See, in the modern culture, a woman's perception of her own high value is constantly being validated. Anytime that she gets a compliment, she gets hit on, someone likes her Facebook photos, follows her on Instagram, it reinforces this idea that what she possesses is of extremely high value.
So then perhaps what men and women have to offer each other really aren't equal, that in today's sexual marketplace, women really do have something of more value.
That's the common perception amongst women today, that they are the prize and it's the proper role of men to be competing for that.
Are they wrong? I mean, aren't they just perceiving their worth as according to the laws of supply and demand in the sexual marketplace?
Possibly, but many in the MGTOW community would argue that we're in a bubble and that the value that women think that they have in today's sexual marketplace is artificially high.
How is that possible? Because if women were putting their price too high, wouldn't we then be seeing a large number of single women who've just priced themselves out of the market?
But that's exactly what happened. Of course, women won't realize that they've priced themselves out of the market. They're more likely to look around and say, where have all the good men gone? But the statistics are very clear. In the 50 years between 1960 and 2010, the percentage of the US population that was single has tripled. It used to be quite rare, just 16%. Now it's 47% and it's growing every year.
Okay, but if what you're saying is true, then why don't women just lower their price to be more competitive in the sexual marketplace?
Some do, and the response they get is fascinating, though that's a big topic and it's probably best saved for another interview. But a lot of women are emotionally invested in their value being very high, and so they're reluctant to admit that the market has changed and their place in it has also changed. The extreme example of this is a woman who got lots of male attention in her 20s and is now resentful that she can't attract the same high caliber males in her 30s and 40s.
This sort of reminds me of someone who buys real estate, and when they come to sell, they find that the market's dropped and that their asset has depreciated. But they have in their mind that it's worth a certain amount, and so rather than just make a quick sale, they stubbornly hold on to their asset because they're emotionally invested in their house being worth a certain amount.
Exactly, and the same happens to a woman who doesn't embrace her age. Rather than face facts and admit to herself that her sexual market value has dropped, she blames men. She calls them shallow and superficial simply because they don't meet her price and they're interested in younger women.
Well, that's older women, but what about younger women who are at their sexual market value peak?
Well, even those women need to face reality and look at the marketplace with fresh eyes. Just because you're getting hit on lots at the club or you've got a string of orbiters who upvote your photos on social media, that doesn't mean that those are high caliber males. What they need to recognize is that the marketplace has shifted, and there's never actually been a time in history when men have been more empowered to independently seek out their own sexual gratification.
In what way are men empowered to meet their own sexual needs? Aren't they completely dependent on women?
Not anymore. Western women are now competing against pornography, prostitution, soon sex dolls and sex robots, not to mention women from other cultures. See, women from other cultures have a completely different approach to how they price themselves in the sexual marketplace, though that's a big topic. We'll cover that in another time.
So why is this important for women to be aware of?
Well, it's only important if they don't want to be single in their 30s and 40s. If that doesn't bother them, then they can safely ignore this information. But if they desire companionship and a long-term relationship, then they need to be aware of how the sexual marketplace has changed so they can adjust their price accordingly.
Are you saying that they need to be more sexually available?
No, I'm not saying that, though perhaps that could be part of it. But I think more important is that you now need to be an impressive person in your own right in order to be a desirable female companion. You need to have your own interests, your own talents, ambition. What's changed is that sex itself is not as valuable commodity as it used to be, and so you need to have more than that to trade.
As well as all those things you mentioned, I would think that sexuality itself is probably under attack from all other forms of gratification which are easier to obtain.
That's true, though sex is likely to always be near the top of the list for male needs, but things have changed a lot. Sexual gratification now competes with all other types of entertainment. See, back in the day, perhaps sex was one of the only things you really had to unwind, have fun, that was easy and accessible, but now things are a lot easier and a lot more accessible. Your sexuality itself is competing against the internet, computer games, television, all available at the click of a mouse. So absolutely, I think that sexuality itself now has competition.
I find this all pretty depressing. The picture that you paint of men and women basically speaking different languages, or I guess in economic terms, using different currencies, it sort of seems like a miracle that any transaction can take place at all.
Things are strained at the moment. That's why so many people are single and so many others are getting divorced. We're definitely in a time of rapid change, but there's no need to be depressed because once you understand this information, well, then you can use it to your advantage.
That sounds like insider trading.
In a way, it is, absolutely. Knowing how the sexual marketplace works is extremely empowering, and there's a whole conversation that we could have about how men should use this information.
That sounds very interesting, but unfortunately we've run out of time today. Can you come back another time and we can continue this discussion?
I'd be happy to.
Well, I would be interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think that relationships are inherently transactional? Do you think the laws of supply and demand can apply in the sexual marketplace? Let us know in the comment section below.
That's right, and be sure to hit that like button and make sure you've subscribed to the channel. If you want to take your support of Red Pill interviews to the next level, the way to do that is through the Patreon page. There's a link in the description box below.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.